The rivalry is back on.
How's it going, everybody? Hello, Colts fans. Welcome back to the Bring the Juice podcast. I am your co-host, Derek Larger, and with me, as always, is Cody Felger. And today, we're going to be talking about a potential free agent in Jadeveon Clowney. So, earlier today, ESPN's Josina Anderson stated that the Colts are a potential destination for Jadeveon Clowney. Again, I kind of hate that wording given the fact that, just about any free agent is a potential, the Colts are a potential destination for any free agent. It doesn't really make a difference what. But anyway, going off of the tagline, we're talking again about Jadeveon Clowney. So Jadeveon Clowney basically stated to reporters that he wants to stay in Seattle, but he is not opposed to going to somewhere else if the offer is right. And Seattle cannot franchise tag him. And with the franchise tag being set at $17.128 million for a franchise tag, certainly can expect that he will be wanting anywhere from 18 to 20 million a year for his defensive end contract, potentially wanting more. So, first question we have is, would it make sense to sign Clowney? And, of course, when you're talking about the first pick in a draft just a few years ago, obviously there's a reason he was brought in. He has certainly been a great player. And whether or not you think he has lived up to his expectation of being elite status, that really doesn't matter. He still is a dominant defensive end when he can be, and he certainly has tape to show that. So anytime that you can add another defensive end piece, especially to something like that where, Justin Houston is getting up there in age, it could be good for this defensive line to have a Jadeveon Clowney to start on one end, a Kamiko Toure on another end, and have Justin Houston come in on occasion. That would be great for our depth and for the fact of getting Justin Houston less reps to be able to save him for later on in the season. So that certainly is a good reason to have him.
Yeah, Derek, you touched on some of that stuff. Another thing that I think could potentially be really good, I liked all the stuff you said about, the defensive end position. Obviously, you had Justin Houston, who had a really good year last year, but he's getting up there in age. You have Kamiko Toure coming off that awful injury. And then you got Ben Banigou, another young player with potential. And you got Jabaal Sheard, a guy who's getting up there at age as well. And you're not sure if you're going to bring him back yet. I personally think you should. But, bringing in Clowney, man, the thing I like about Clowney is he's a pretty well-rounded player as far as versus the pass rush versus the run. And I know 2019 wasn't the best example of that because Clowney was injured. And there was just a lot of factors into that. But I was looking here at 2018, so this was Clowney's last year with Houston. He really stepped it up and had a really good season. He, Pro Football Focus graded him as one of the better overall edge players, and it seemed like every year he had continued to ascend as far as his play. And he's really good against, obviously, the pass. Besides this last year, he's had 9 sacks respectively. And he's also a really good run defender, which I think is something that the Colts really need. And that could even potentially limit, if you sign a Clowney, do you bring back Jabaal Sheard, who I know has been really, really excellent at stopping the run? Clowney can do all that, and he can also rush the passer a little bit better than Sheard. And he's 4 or 5 years younger than Sheard. So there's a lot of factors into whether or not Clowney. I personally think it would be a good fit. I know that in Houston's 4-3 defense, Clowney really shined, and that could be a really good thing to get him back into that 4-3 defense with the Colts. And I think that he fits a lot and checks a lot of the boxes that the Colts need. And I think that he just could be a good potential fit for the Colts in this role, in this system. And let's face it, the Colts have some needs. And honestly, I would say pass rush is a need. You always are looking for edge rushers. And I think that you have other needs, though, that you need to address in the draft before edge rusher. And so signing Clowney could really help with that, help kind of alleviate that, and then you can put some of your focus on, the quarterback, on the wide receivers, on the defensive interior, and what have you. And just signing Clowney would be a good fit, and he wouldn't be a guy that would be a stopgap solution. I mean, he just turned 27, so he's still fairly young, still has a lot of years ahead of him, and I think that he could potentially be a really good fit in this Colts defense. And so if indeed Seattle does not bring him back, I think it's a no-brainer. The Colts should pursue him hard.
All right, next thing we're going to be talking about is perks and drawbacks of signing a guy like Jadeveon Clowney. Well, obvious reasons that, perks with the dominant side that we can see. He is a good run, and he's a good run defender. He certainly gets pressure up on those C gaps, which are really good for when you're trying to get a running back off his rhythm, and he certainly can rush the passer. We all know this. Obviously, when you're looking at Jadeveon Clowney, you're talking about, gaps where he sometimes just disappears at certain times. That's always been a criticism of Jadeveon Clowney. But with that, you can also mention to him that, hey, that's why we don't want to give you elite level defensive line money, because of the simple fact that we know you have more in you than what you're showing. So that could be a perk on the Colts side to kind of talk him down on something like that. You're getting face value for what you're getting. He's a good defensive end. He's not elite, but he's certainly far from bad or average. He's definitely in the good to great category. And it's certainly a guy that, even if you're going to question his play at times, is certainly a guy that would do dividends on anything to help with the Colts right now.
Yeah, Derek, you make some good points there. And I think to add to your point, one thing that I have to consider for Clowney is the fact that he's only played 16 games, so all 16 games in a season once in his career. And and he missed 3 games this last year. And so, are you willing, I guess the Colts are going to have to answer this, are you willing to pay a guy like Clowney the kind of money that he's going to demand for 13, 14 games a year? And I think that's a real thing that you have to consider if you're the Colts. And I think that's one thing that Chris Ballard has talked about as far as getting depth. And so I think adding Clowney certainly helps you with that depth as well as gets you a pretty darn good player. But, you just have to factor that in. Okay, if we pay Clowney this much, we're really not going to pay him for 16 games because who knows? He facts are that he has not played 16 games most of his career. And so that's something you just have to consider if you're the Colts. Obviously, the Colts don't have a player like Clowney on their defensive line right now. And so adding a player like him would be really, really a major lift for this defense. And he's a guy that you can kind of build with in your defense. I mean, he's still fairly young. And so, there's some perks and there's some drawbacks. Those are some of the drawbacks. We've kind of talked about some of the perks. The Colts just kind of have to weigh the risk here and kind of see, okay, do we think that he's really, really worth it? And so that's just something the Colts are going to have to decide. It doesn't really matter what I think. Doesn't really matter what Derek thinks. Ultimately, it matters what Chris Ballard thinks. And so that's just something that they're going to have to figure out as they go on in this process of free agency, and then just how that impacts their draft approach.
And now I'll kind of touch a little bit on what I was saying with the contract for Jadeveon Clowney. I've already kind of mentioned it, how the franchise tag is a little over $17 million. I would expect the Colts to try and maybe go a little higher than that, maybe 18, 19 million at the most. Don't expect Ballard to spend over 20 million on him per year. I don't imagine that. But, that could also be an issue with whether or not he wants to come back because, he knows he's going to have to get that kind of money from Seattle if that's what they're going to do for him. And the last thing that we're going to mention is, would you sign Jadeveon Clowney over any other defensive line free agent? Well, over the simple fact that we just learned that Chris Jones is going to get franchise tagged by the Kansas City Chiefs, we know that defensive line pick is now off of the table. And as of right now, I think Jadeveon Clowney should be up there with the top of the defensive line depth chart of free agents that we should look at for sure. Especially since now we know Yannick is going to of the Jaguars is going to ask for 20 to 22 million for his contract. I don't necessarily know if the Colts are going to actually want to spend that much for a guy like that. So I could say that's relatively close to what Jadeveon Clowney is going to want to get. So it's something like that, I would think.
I think I would agree, Derek. It's something where you have to kind of weigh the options. I would say probably Yannick Ngakoue is a better pass rusher overall than Clowney is, but I would say overall Clowney is probably a better overall well-rounded player. And I think the Colts just have to, debate that in their mind. Do they think that, do they want to pay Yannick Ngakoue, a guy who's not really that great against the run but is a better pass rusher, or do they want to pay a guy like Clowney who's a better just overall player? And so I probably would personally because, I believe that in getting more quality things from your players who can do things really, really well, as opposed to, if you have a guy who's an elite pass rusher like Yannick Ngakoue, but is not so good at stopping the run. I mean, you're just paying him to rush the passer, which is really, really important. But for me, I would rather have a guy who's a really good pass rusher, maybe not elite pass rusher, but a good pass rusher nonetheless, and also a really good run stopper. And so that's why I would probably choose him over Ngakoue. And I know there might be some people who would disagree with me, and that's totally okay. But that's probably what I would do if I was the Colts. And I think, obviously, what you talked about with Chris Jones off of the market now, the Colts have money to spend, and I think they need to spend it on a guy that's going to make an impact. And Clowney's certainly going to make an impact on this Colts defense. And really, you look at it, say he hits the open market. That really doesn't happen a whole lot, especially from the edge rushers. And so I think the Colts would be wise to really look into this and really, think about signing Jadeveon Clowney. And so that's what I would do personally if I was the Colts. Again, Chris Ballard knows a lot more than either of us do. So we're going to trust him and his big brain. But overall, I would say, yeah, I probably would. If I was the Colts and I have all this sitting on all this cash, I probably would sign an impact player like Clowney if indeed Seattle lets him walk.
All right, awesome. Well, hey, guys, thank you guys so much for listening in on this. It's a quick, brief description of what was being stated about Jadeveon Clowney and what our thoughts are on, whether or not we should go for him and what a contract will look like. So we hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much, and go Colts.